It's going to be very difficult for Shaun Micallefs to be able to send this up.
Wiki wiki wah, wiki 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 wah wah wah, wiki 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 wah wah wah. Wiki wah. Well, the federal government not only laid an egg in Parliament last week, but also suffered a prolapse. As a result, there's been some leaking, mainly to Peter Van Onselen, who tells us that in a bid to secure safe passage of his religious discrimination bill, the PM was prepared to offer a National Integrity Commission to win over the crossbench MPs he needed because he didn't have enough support from his own backbench. And this wasn't some toothless ICAC that couldn't be retrospective he was offering. This was one that had at least 2 molars and some short-term memory function. But the Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, who had staked his career through the heart on passing this legislation, had his plan rejected by his most senior colleagues after a heated debate. Oh, man, I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall at that cabinet meeting. Fortunately, I didn't need to be, did I, Fly?
None of us needed to be, thanks to a certain cabinet minister who reported the whole thing to the aforesaid Peter Van Onselen.
Any idea who this cabinet minister might have been?
I was there when the shit hit the fan, Shaun, so I was a bit distracted while laying some eggs in it.
I did notice Josh Frydenberg looked a bit uncomfortable discussing it on television the next day.
I think that's just his natural expression, Shaun.
Thank you, Fly. In the end, after much straining, the religious discrimination bill was passed by the lower house. This despite 5 Liberals crossing the floor to vote with Labor, presumably to get a feel for what it's going to be like on that side of the chamber in a few months' time. 5 crossed the floor. Sure, sounds like a fun book by Enid Blyton, but no, it is instead the sad tale of how the PM
suffered a humiliating defeat on the floor of the Parliament.
Well, up until now, the PM has always triumphed in any battle with his enemies, be they in the National Party or his own. He has been undefeated. No one gets near him. And fair enough. But the decision by these guys points to a growing split in the government. In fact, so big is this coalition crack that the PM
Ended up wedging himself.
Now, you might be thinking, does it really matter how the Religious Freedom Bill was passed? What's important is that it was passed. Well, unfortunately, the bill had further to go on its journey through the parliamentary digestive system. It had to make its way through the alimentary canal that is the Senate, where there were more rumblings and pain caused by bowel obstructions, and eventually surgery was required to remove the bill entirely and shelve it, presumably in a bell jar with diseased, not to be used under any circumstances written on it. Of course, the big question arising out of all of this is not about the fate of gay and trans students or the continued non-existence of a federal ICAC, but who can the coalition blame for all of this instead of themselves? Attorney General Micallefs, whose department drafted the bill, said the proposed amendments passed by Labor, the crossbench and the Liberal backbenchers who crossed the floor would worsen discrimination, although she didn't explain how. Mary Brett Punish from the Attorney General's cupboard. Is this advice from your department or just some hand-flapping phone call from the Australian Christian lobby?
No, absolutely not. It is definitely not us pandering to God whistlers. I cannot make that point any more clearly.
I know, you'll unhinge your jaw.
Shaun, as Micallefs says, these amendments have to go to the ALRC for review and cannot be rushed because, as Micallefs also says...
Do you know what happens when you rush something and you don't potentially consider the consequences?
Well, yes, exactly what's happening now. Why leave such a controversial bill until now to table, so close to an election and with so few days to deal with it?
Well, we wanted to hurry it through as quickly as possible. So.
The primary job of government is to pass legislation. You don't seem to be even able to draft it properly. Look at the anti-trolling bill you wanted to pass so people wouldn't say mean things about Scott Morrison on social media. Defamation experts say it bears no relationship to the government's stated objectives, is likely to cause confusion and substantially increase cost, makes it harder to get defamatory posts removed, and is a waste of the court's time.
Well, none of that matters anymore, Shaun, because people are just now insulting Scott by text message.
And what about the federal ICAC the PM was proposing to use as a honey trap? That was an election promise back in 2019, and you still haven't done it. Isn't that an appalling betrayal of the people who voted for this policy?
Absolutely, Shaun. Absolutely. And I think that sends a clear signal against integrity barrelling. When it comes to campaign promises, what's the difference between a federal ICAC, a car park and a women's changing room? I ask you.
Well, going by the rate you're not delivering on any of them, very little.
And by failing to deliver that integrity commission, we're sending the most powerful message possible that this government stands against that kind of cynical voter manipulation.
All right, so promising things you have no intention of delivering eventually makes the electorate so disillusioned they don't trust anyone anymore, thereby making corruption impossible.
Well, you can't have shocking levels of rorting if nobody is capable of being shocked.
Mary Brett, thank you.
Thank you.
And please accept, courtesy of Mad as Hell, a dinner for two at the Waratah Gardens Aged Care Facility. A delicious three-course meal for you and a guest, valued at less than $6. That's barely acceptable.
Thank you.
Coming up, we talk to the former footballer who's coming out of retirement in order to spend less time with his family. And Jerry Harvey. Would he sell his own grandmother? And if so, would it be 36 months interest-free with no deposit? That's coming up on Can Do Capitalism. Right now, though, it's time to see how the government can win us over by polling day, if not by decency and integrity, then perhaps by appealing to our hip pocket.
I want money.
Because the government prides itself on being low on taxes, it finds itself in something of a locked safe in the back of a stolen flatbed truck as it approaches the cliff of the next election. How does it spend its way out of a government debt of $855 billion with no money? Particularly given it's already slated to grow an extra $60 billion over the next 6 months, with gross debt expected to be $1.2 trillion by 2024-25. Well, to answer that question, Tosh Greenslade in a wig and glasses.
That's exactly right, Shaun. Think of our economy as a leg that has been attacked by a shark. Money gushes uncontrollably from its torn femoral artery, and the only way to stop the bleeding is for all of us to become cardiovascular surgeons and operate on ourselves before we lose consciousness. The question is, where do we get the blood needed for our transfusion? Answer, we need to borrow it from the other leg. In other words, the government can bloodlet by slashing things like welfare and the NDIS and then use that blood to save the leg that the rest of us need to hop about on and off into a debt-free future. Shaun?
Thank you very much. Tosh Greenslade there in a wig and glasses with another of our whimsical human body analogies. Thank you, Tosh. Yes, good to stay hydrated. Of course, the economy is doing well and the PM is rightly proud of his record.
1 million more women in work.
Not one of them in a new cabinet appointment, but still, the government can't be expected to do everything. On which subject, I'd like to do a little bit of plain speaking. Now, obviously, it would be arrogant of me to sit here and presume to speak on behalf of all the women in this country, and I have no doubt they would tell you exactly the same thing. But the fact of the matter is that I've been an ally long before it became irritating to mention it. For example, at university, I was the only male member of the all-women's badminton team. Now, you might say, well, why should I listen to some geriatric soy boy talk about something he knows nothing about? Well, first of all, rude. And secondly, good point and well made. But what's important to remember here is that I am the host of a satirical news comedy show on the ABC, which means that first, I have to be male, and secondly, because it's satire, a lot of what we do doesn't have to actually be funny. Mad as Hell's chief purpose is to patronisingly over-explain things with a sneer on my stupid, fat, smug face. So what's the deal with the difficulty the Liberal Party seems to have with setting themselves a target for the number of women in Parliament, but no means to achieve it? I like to liken it to playing a game of darts with my mates and wanting to hit the bullseye. All I have to do is hit the centre of the board, and even a double 20 would be a good result. Indeed, anywhere inside the outer wire is worth something. Unfortunately, I don't have any darts. And even if I did, I have no ability or interest in playing the game. If I'm going to get together with my mates, I'd much rather do it over a slightly cheaper beer down the pub. What happens in Canberra stays in an unreleased report inside Phil Gateson's filing cabinet. Please like and subscribe. OK, Dramella Bird, assistant to the Assistant Attorney-General Amanda Stoker, did you catch the Grace Tame Brittany Higgins National Press Club address last week?
Shaun, I was busy legally vetting the PM's apology to women that he gave in the Parliament on Tuesday.
Yeah, but that was the day before the Press Club address. Why were you vetting it the day after he's given it?
Well, you know what happens when you rush something. You don't potentially consider the consequences. Yeah. But I think the message of those two women was action. So they're preaching to the choir as far as this government is concerned. Case in point, the PM has a fever dream one night about a Sikh family not being able to secure a rental property, and boom, we're onto it. The religious discrimination bill is ready to go.
Yes, but what about action when it comes to women?
Well, as soon as Ms Tame said she had received a threatening phone call, we swung into action with a 4-point plan. 1, identify the culprit. 2, accept their denials. 3, make an announcement to the effect of, well, one of them is lying, which leads immediately to 4, imply that perhaps the public shouldn't believe everything Ms Tame says.
Well, you never know. Someone might admit to making that call.
Well, I don't think that's likely, Shaun. They would have received their own threatening phone call by now.
All right, well, can I ask you about Brittany Higgins' release of Barnaby's liar and hypocrite text last week? She said at the press club this suggested to her that the Deputy PM believed the Prime Minister's office knew about Ms Higgins' alleged assault earlier than the PM told Parliament. Let's review the tape.
I became aware of the alleged sexual assault at about 8:30 yesterday morning. That is true. That is when I became aware of it, Mr Speaker, and the first that my office became aware of an alleged sexual assault, I'm advised, was on the 5th of April of this year. Sorry. No, the 12th, I'm sorry, I've misread that, apologies. The 12th of February 2021. That's when my office first became aware, I'm advised, of an alleged sexual assault.
OK, so he misread the 12th as the 5th and February as April. My question to you is, does he need new glasses?
Shaun, the notes the Prime Minister was misreading obviously had other things in them than just the date he and the PMO found out about the assault.
Another date, the 5th of April?
Yes, 2021, as he said.
Why would he have had the 5th of April 2021 in his notes, given he was quoting from them on the 16th of February 2021?
Well, maybe it was the 5th of April for another year.
Could it have been the 5th of April of 2019? 4 days after Brittany Higgins met with Linda Reynolds, 2 days before a staffer had reported the alleged assault to the PMO and said that the PMO was going to discuss it with the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff, and 1 day after Linda Reynolds spoke with the AFP.
Maybe.
OK, so let's say the PMO spoke to the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff the next day, the 5th of April. Isn't it likely that that's why the 5th of April was written down in the PM's notes, and that he didn't so much misread the date as accidentally read out the correct one?
Shaun, the 5th of April could have been there for any number of reasons. It's the feast day of St Albert of Montecavino. It's the day Winston Churchill retired. It's Spencer Tracy's birthday. Oh.
What?
It's the day Charlton Heston passed away peacefully at his home in Beverly Hills.
You maniac.
So don't try and play Nancy Drew with the PM's inability to read properly. If what was or wasn't in the notes was that important, I'm sure Albo would have asked to have them tabled, which he would have refused because the PM would have no doubt shown them to a couple of his more servile ministerial lickspittles on his way to question time that morning so it could qualify as a cabinet document.
Well, Dramella, it's been a delight, as always, and for coming along tonight, please accept, with our compliments, one of these remaindered 2019 Coalition Back in Black coffee mugs, repurposed to now prematurely claim back in government. That's for you to keep.
Thank you.
It hasn't all been bad news for the PM this week, though, with 60 Minutes doing their best to supplant the impression of the PM we've had over the last 3 years with another. And if the intention was to show us what a great husband and dad he is and make us all feel bad about not liking him and saying we're going to vote him out for Albo, who we haven't even seen cook a meal, then mission accomplished. What was particularly impressive was that despite the speeches at the National Press Club last week, Grace still gets a mention at the PM's home.
Thank you, Lord, for this food. In Jesus' name, amen.
By the way, I want to make it very clear that we're not making cheap jokes about the PM's family here. We're making cheap jokes about the PM himself. And I hope he takes our open mockery and ridicule of who he is and what he does in that spirit. In fact, I'm sure he does, because as he told 60 Minutes...
It's part of my job. It's never part of the family's job.
That's right. Unless, of course, it can take some of the heat off for that trip to Hawaii.
I thought I was making the right decision for my kids. I obviously... was wrong. I wish that had never happened. But I can't change it.
No. What I also found fascinating, and it's not something I would ever make fun of, were the more personal revelations from the PM.
I've worn out the carpet on the side of my bed here, particularly down in Canberra, where I spent most of the pandemic, on my knees, praying.
Still nothing that a series of well-targeted carpet replacement grant schemes couldn't fix. But it wasn't all a puff piece. The all-holds-barred grilling of the PM at the hands of Karl Stefanovic was one I have not seen since Amelia Mosley asked him who his favourite superhero was back in the 2019 campaign, and he told her it was Aquaman.
Aquaman.
I really liked Aquaman. I thought he was pretty cool, really cool. So, yeah, Aquaman.
Yeah, I love it.
Karl Stefanovic laughed along politely at the PM's attempt to make himself relatable this time round, but the message in 2022 was not who is Scott Morrison so much as who he isn't. And who he isn't is a man who is...
I'm not going to pretend to you that I go out each day and I buy a loaf of bread and I buy a litre of milk.
Much in the way that he doesn't go out and pretend to build chicken coops, work on a farm, drive a truck, pilot an Air Force jet, make a latte, design a car, work, that he doesn't know he's being photographed, or that he enjoys the company of Anthony Pratt. The man behind the Tell Nothing interview is the PM's own focus group Svengali and image obscurant Donald McKengadine.
This pic of ScoMo playing a ukulele came second in an online poll for the most humanising image of a world leader, sponsored by Instagram.
Oh, what came first?
Oh, that was Hitler playing with Blondie in Berchtesgaden.
Oh.
We've appealed the judge's decision, obviously, but it would be inappropriate to make any comment given the matter is before the courts.
All right, now, well, I don't want to interrogate you as ruthlessly as Karl did.
Margarita?
No, thanks, I'm good, I just had a beer. But the message seemed to be about authenticity.
Authenticity and laughing at nothing. It's very important to be amused at perfectly banal exchanges and use laughter as a social lubricant to apply a salve to dry, difficult questions.
Too soon. Too soon.
Yes, but according to the story, the PM has a big gun, a secret weapon that will save the PM this election.
That's right, Shaun. May I unveil it?
Of course.
How good is the Ask Wife 2022?
Hi, Shaun.
Hi. So what does the Ask Wife 2022 do?
Have you heard of the Oracle of Delphi, Shaun?
I have.
Well, she's like that, but with less gas fumes. Like Siri and Alexa, ScoMo consults with her on anything he has no experience with when Jen's not around.
Now, what sort of things?
Ask the Ask Wife 2022, Shaun, you sexist pig.
I'm sorry. What sort of things does the PM talk to you about that he has no experience of?
Oh, Shaun. Women, milk, bread, petrol, rat tests, self-determinism, the concepts of truth, integrity, accountability and transparency, correct use of public monies, fashion, how to cook food without photographing himself doing it. That's a work in progress, Shaun. And nepotism when it comes to his church group.
She covers a whole range of topics, Shaun. Ask her about how Jen feels about being used as a human shield whenever ScoMo feels he's under fire.
Oh, Scott doesn't need me for that, Shaun. He's got a hide as thick as a rhinoceros and a similar approach when it comes to dealing with people. He just charges at them and gores and tramples them until whatever they were complaining about is the least of their problems.
Well, good luck to both of you with the campaign. Hopefully you'll be able to celebrate at the end of it all with a trip to Hawaii over Christmas when the country's on fire because you haven't done enough on climate change, or there's a new COVID variant, or some fresh hell engulfing us all that you haven't anticipated.
Too soon, Shaun. Too soon.
She's a pretty handy device, eh, Shaun?
Yeah, although I can see through it.
I think everybody can, Shaun.
Marie Curie discovered radium and polonium, but refused to smile for this photo. So too Rosa Parks, plus she was a bit difficult on a bus. And Emmeline Pankhurst demanded votes for women, but would it have killed her to ask politely? Disappointing women, next on your ABC.
Welcome back. And with Ukraine and Russian troops still staring down the barrels of each other's guns on the border between the two countries, it's a tense standoff, with each party continuing to maintain the other is the aggressor. I'm joined now by Dragan O'Hennessy from Cossacks for Peace and Georgi Urinchek, author of Crimea River. Dragan O'Hennessy, you first. Does Russia intend to annex any of Ukraine's territory?
Not at all. Well, this is not land grab. We are simply defending ourselves.
Really?
Absolutely.
You think, though, Georgi Urinchek, this is the next step in a campaign of annexation?
I do.
No, this is nonsense. The last thing Russia wants is lack of trust and friendship with its neighbours.
Are you reassured by that, Georgia Urinchek?
I am not. They have missiles pointed at our heads.
They have missile shields pointed at our missiles.
Gentlemen, we have to leave it there. Let's just hope the ceasefire holds.
A cup of tea? There's only a little bit of Novichok in it. You won't even taste it.
Thank you, gentlemen. Well, it's always deeply troubling when trusted and much-loved media institutions are cyber-hacked. But it was just as troubling when it was revealed last week that News Corp had been hacked. But I ask you, could this hack explain this article in Liberal Party fanzine The Australian headed, "Sorry, PM, but you're just not up to the job," describing the Morrison government as a failure and describing Scott Morrison as the Liberal Party's Kevin Rudd, possibly the most offensive insult of all? Could it also explain this article on Barnaby Joyce, which talks about his rambling, bumbling media performances, saying if Joyce had an ounce of honour or decency, he would resign, and that his high opinion of himself is divorced from the reality of his performance, stating he is an embarrassment to Australia and is better suited to driving the clown car at a three-ring circus than being Deputy Prime Minister? Well, it's either that or a campaign by Murdoch to render the ABC completely redundant. More disturbingly, though, the head of ASIO, seen here, reports that the radicalisation of young people is climbing up our annual threat assessment charts.
As a nation, we need to reflect on why some of our teenagers are hanging Nazi flags and portraits of the Christchurch killer on their bedroom walls.
Could it be some tasteless Shawshank Redemption-style escape plan, or is it something more Cold War? Top intelligence operative George Smiley. Well, of course, in my day, it was just posters of David Cassidy and Susie Quattro. And the worst thing David Cassidy ever did was appear on Celebrity Apprentice. More alarmingly, I think, is Burgess revealing that a foreign power had tried to influence an Australian election and that this time it wasn't Rupert Murdoch. Did he name names? Well, he wouldn't reveal the country or the election, but fortunately for us all, loose-lipped multiple security sources who are not authorised to speak publicly confirmed to The Age that a Chinese intelligence service was behind the plot and that it involved New South Wales Labor. Thanks, George. Pleasure. So to recap, a Chinese spy ring has attempted to bankroll New South Wales Labor candidates in the upcoming federal election in an attempt to get MPs elected to Parliament. Of course, what's most galling for the government about this is that the New South Wales Liberals are tearing themselves apart, unable to decide on their candidates, while Labor kicks back and has their decisions made for them by China. Anyway, later on in the show, with news that foreign powers are also trying to infiltrate our security networks via dating apps like Tinder, and this warning from Liberal Senator James Patterson.
If you're a 6 and they're a 10, it might not be your looks that they've been charmed by, it might be your access to classified information.
I speak to this person from the Department of Foreign Affairs.
Pernickety Krill.
Pernickety, you're a 6. Have you been approached by any 10s showing an inexplicable interest in your charms?
No, I don't get approached by 10s.
What figure would you assign to those who express a romantic interest in you?
-7.
All right, so you don't doubt that they're genuinely interested?
Sadly, no.
That'd be a good cover, though, wouldn't it? Set up a really ugly spy to seduce you. You'd never suspect they had an ulterior motive.
No, but I do have standards.
All right, where would you draw the line?
-80. Anyone under that I'd consider.
And if someone was around 0 or above?
Anyone above 0 can have my work computer.
Thank you very much, Pernickety. The Minister for Defence, though, has weaponised this ASIO intel with his suggestion that insofar as Anthony Albanese is concerned, there is
evidence, Mr Speaker, that the Chinese Communist Party, the Chinese government, has also made a decision about who they're going to back in the next federal election, Mr Speaker. That's open. That is obvious, Mr Speaker.
The Leader of
and
the
they
House,
have picked this bloke as their candidate, Mr Speaker.
Which is good news if, as Mr Dutton is constantly telling the Today Show, we are on the brink of war with China. With their preferred candidate in the top job and a Labor Defence Minister, we can all be friends again. Brian Pegmatite, is Albo winning the election the best strategy to avoid being invaded by China, as Peter Dutton has suggested?
Oh, absolutely, Shaun. But hopefully it won't come to that, because as the last election proved, Labor is hopeless.
OK, well, assuming the PM pulls off another Hail Mary pass and by some miracle stumbles back into office again, with Peter still in the saddle as a Fence Minister, how does he intend to deal with the threat from up north? And I'm not talking about Queensland.
Well, either way, we need every piece of military hardware we have on back order. As Peter says, these new Abrams tanks we've got coming will give our soldiers the best possibility of success and protection from harm.
Yeah, these tanks you speak of replace the Army's 59 Abrams M1A1s, which were bought in 2007, but as you can see from the newspaper graphic there, have not seen combat.
Exactly, Shaun. And this will really help their resale value, as they've only ever been driven to church on Sundays.
Yeah, but when the original 59 Abrams tanks were purchased back in 2004, the then Defence Minister said Australia made the right choice to provide that extra support to the Australian Army for at least the next few decades. 15 years isn't quite a few decades, is it?
Well, it's one, and you can't get fewer than that.
Well, thank you, Brian, for coming in tonight. Please accept with our compliments 2 days and 2 nights free hire of a cadaver dog from Jim's Cadaver Dogs. They smell trouble.
Lovely.
And with the coalition distracted by internal division, the ALP isn't missing an opportunity to get stuck in.
This government's a smoking ruin of division and disunity and dysfunction, and ordinary Australians are paying the price for that.
But ALP double spokesperson Sammy and Vagary, it's not as though Labor haven't fallen victim to division in the past, is it?
Oh, that's ancient history, Shaun. Yeah, all those spot fires of disunity and embers of rage that threaten to boil over into a battle royale style, every man for themselves, armed to the teeth and fight to the death blood feud, that burned out years ago.
Exactly. We're definitely not a smoking ruin these days, Shaun.
All right, and the light on the hill?
Gosh, we only just managed to get that one under control.
Yeah, plus, turns out it was just Kim Carr burning an effigy of Joel Fitzgibbon up there.
Can I interest you in one of our better future one-size-fits-all teas? Only 35 Juan.
No, I'm good, thank you. All right, so definitely not a smoking ruin is what you're saying, yeah?
Oh, definitely not, Shaun. We're more like one of those UNESCO protected sites of cultural significance. I mean, sure, we're historically noteworthy and kids in high school learn about us in Australian history, but it's not like we actually do anything anymore.
OK, well, now, finally, can I put this to you? The COVID pandemic, currently in its 3rd year, this is a sustained period of influence that Labor can surely only dream of.
Shaun, we all know you're just pretending to be cynical about Labor in a vain attempt to avoid being accused of bias.
Yeah, be honest. How are you going to celebrate when Labor wins in 3 months' time?
Oh, I don't know. I'll probably splurge on one of these T-shirts.
I bet you will, you sick fuck.
Well, young Enid, I've just had a phone call from the Prime Minister's office.
I'm listening.
And it was wondering if you'd like to spend your week of work experience with us shredding certain documents in such a way that nothing gets sheeted home to the Prime Minister.
What sort of documents?
Oh, just some documents that are taking up too much archive space and quite frankly, attracting a few too many FOI applications.
Are these the documents from when Fran Bailey was Tourism Minister?
Well, you certainly know your political history, little lady.
Don't patronise me, you fucking turd.
Yes, well, just remember this is a prequel and set almost 10 years ago, long before men were aware that such gendered expressions were unacceptable.
Do these documents relate to when the current Prime Minister worked for Tourism Australia?
That such documents are the very ones we're asking you to destroy is merely a coincidence, Enid.
Are these the ones that prove he was favouring advertising companies with fat, taxpayer-funded contracts if they agreed to do mates rates work for the New South Wales Liberal Party, which he was president of at the time?
Look, what the documents refer to is unimportant, Enid. What is important is that the shredding of them be done in secret and that all evidence be got rid of forever. I even want the shredder burned.
Shredder, 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 shredder.
Yes, Prime Minister, I've got my best man on it. And she's a woman, too, so we can control and bully her. And when things inevitably turn to shit, leave her holding the baby. Which, as the good book implies, is the natural order of things. Blessed be the... Here she comes. We never had this conversation.
I'm no IT expert, Mr. Bowers. There's something wrong with this shredder. I ran the documents through like 5 times and they just kept coming out the other end completely intact. I put the code in and everything.
This is a fax machine, you stupid girl. What code?
This number I found pinned to Phil Gaetchen's body.
This is David Crow's phone number. Fortunately, works for the Sydney Morning Herald, which nobody reads.
It's a relief.
Let's be on the safe side. Take the rest of this and burn down 9 Fairfax headquarters as a warning.
Well, not coming up because Starstruck is on in a minute. Atagi says weekly dose of common sense could have neurological side effects. China wins gold in the World Peekaboo Championships. And Putin adopts plan to deal with French president's halitosis. And before we go, a quick congrats to former New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian, who has recently been appointed to the executive team at Optus. Hopefully she can use her new position to help Daryl Maguire replace his phone and iPad, which, according to his ICAC evidence, were destroyed in an unfortunate tractor accident. I'm not sure how the PM feels about the appointment, but no doubt he's thrilled about her going somewhere that offers unlimited texts. Goodbye.
Giant baby.